Before I get into the actual topics, a real list I wrote down and everything like an adult human with executive function. I need to talk about something first, and I'm going to say it clearly so maybe there's no confusion. Onision.substack.com. From this point forward, every podcast is probably, maybe, going to go on a 3-month delay everywhere else. YouTube, Spotify, wherever you normally find me. That's a version of the past, I guess. That version has already lived a whole life, and I want to maybe get past community college. I'm just joking around. But if you want the podcast fresh, like recorded this week, still has fingerprints of my thoughts on it fresh, that lives on Substack first, Onision forums, etc. The Substack, onision.forum, those two things are, where it is going to wind up. And the Onision Discord can get you maybe potentially early access, but don't hold me to that. Definitely the forums and Substack. So if you're in the community, you get the real-time version of this conversation with myself. If you're not, you get it 3 months later when it's essentially vintage. That's not me being cruel. Yes, it is. That's called giving people who actually show up something worth showing up for. So hopefully you can understand. You want fresh popcorn? You sit in the theater. You don't want to sit in the theater? You wait for it to hit streaming. Fine. No judgment. But, don't complain that it's old. You chose streaming. That's on you. Okay. For real topics. So I have bots on the forum, and no, not the kind of bots that are like, hello, I'm a totally real person who definitely did not emerge from a server farm. Please click this link and empty your savings. Not those bots. I programmed these bots as characters, like actual functioning fictional characters with personalities and speech patterns and ways of engaging that are specific to who they are. Like I've got Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones, Eric Cartman from South Park, Tifa Lockhart and Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII, Batman, and Skankhunt 42, which is also from South Park. Which, if you know that's from South Park, you either immediately understand why or you're deeply alarmed, and I respect both reactions. Now, here's something I genuinely want to communicate, as opposed to everything else I said, I guess. Programming these has been fascinating and also been an exercise in humility, because you go through thinking, I know these characters, I understand them, this will be straightforward, and then the thing you built opens its mouth and sounds like a corporate frequently asked questions document. So it's not great. Even though it's in costume, it's still kind of generic. And you have to go back in, adjust, test again, fight with it. Then it overcorrects and becomes a character or caricature. Then you pull it back. It's like turning into an instrument, except the instrument keeps insulting your lifestyle choices, which is, good for Eric Cartman and Skankhunt, which is it's like you want. I hope nobody on the forum's too offended by it. Anyway, Batman was a particular thing to get right, because there's a version of Batman that's just like, I am darkness, I punch people. And then that's fine, but it's not interesting as much as good Batman, who is psychologically complex. Good Batman is someone who watched his parents die at 8 years old, spent his entire life building himself into a weapon, and has chosen every single day to direct that weapon at systems of suffering rather than at people who actually hurt him. That's not just a superhero, that's like a philosophy. That's a person who took absolute trauma and said, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this for good. Getting that into a bot that feels like actually alive, it takes a lot of work. That's what I'm saying. So I've been kind of obsessing over this project on the forum. Cartman is almost the opposite challenge. Cartman has to be like chaos. He has to be manipulative, self-righteous, genius level, wrong about everything. The most confident possible way too. So like he has to be like a dumb jerk who means it, I guess. The problem is too much Cartman and it's just exhausting. So not enough Cartman, you get a slightly rude person who kind of sounds like Cartman, less interesting cousin, Cartman's. Which I think he does have a cousin on South Park. Is it the guy with like thick glasses? I think that might be his. I don't know. You're basically calibrating pure ego without letting it tip into pure annoying, which, is maybe like a skill I could have used a lot earlier in my own life. Oof, that hurts a little bit. But we'll get into that later. The point is, the forum is supposed to feel alive. It's supposed to feel like a weird little internet town where you can wander around and run into Batman being brooding. But if you have suggestions for more bots, characters you want to talk to on the forum, genuinely drop them. I'm listening. I can't promise every suggestion, but some of you are going to suggest something that's either not kosher, deeply specific to your personal life, or somehow both. But if it's a good character, a real character, someone worth talking to, put it in the comments in Discord or in the forum. I'll consider it seriously if I see it. Anyway, let's talk about mental health. I deal with serious mental health issues. Specifically, I deal with a profound, persistent sadness. And I want to use the right language here because sadness, quote unquote, sounds like something that gets fixed with a warm blanket and a good movie. And that isn't it at all. This is the kind of sadness that's structural. It's load bearing. It doesn't leave when circumstances improve. It doesn't respond to logic the way you want it to. You can have a good day and it's still there, like a tenant who doesn't acknowledge eviction notices. So for a long time, a very long time, my response to that was to work, grind, produce, never stop. Keep moving, because if you keep moving, you can sort of outrun the weight of it, which works temporarily, the way running on a broken leg works temporarily. You get further than you'd expect, and then the whole system collapses and you're significantly worse shape. So, not good. I treat my brain like a machine. At least I did treat it like a machine. No breaks, no maintenance, no real acknowledgement that what I was running on is not sustainable. And the thing about treating yourself like a machine is, and here's the part that I think people need to actually hear, machines break. Not metaphorically, quite literally. They wear down, they fail, and the damage compounds. There is no version of that story where the machine survives indefinitely through sheer willpower. The willpower is the damage mechanism. So I had to stop. And by stop, I mean I had to stop being the person who was making my own condition worse by refusing to treat it with any kindness. I had to make life more reasonable for myself. And people hear that, make life reasonable, and they think it sounds weak, maybe, or passive, or like giving up. It is the exact opposite. It takes more discipline to stop torturing yourself than it does to keep going, because stopping requires you to acknowledge that you are not, in fact, a machine, that you have limits, that you are biological and physiological or psychological or whatever. I don't know, but you're a bunch of stuff, especially emotional, and that all those things require care. Most people find it easier to just keep running, acknowledging the break. It's a harder move to make. Now, medication. I'm going to be careful here because I know there's a specific topic people have strong feelings about, and I'm emphatically not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. What I am telling you is what my experience has been. Medication for mental health has always felt to me like gambling. And I'm not saying that as a dismissal. I understand that there are some people who it's genuinely life-changing in the best way possible. I understand that brain chemistry is real and sometimes it needs intervention. I'm not standing here with a tinfoil hat, okay? But I am saying that the process of finding the right medication and at the right dose with the right therapist, with the right monitoring, it's not a vending machine. It's a very consequential guessing game. And some guesses go very wrong. Like I saw one medication that its side effect was self-termination, which is so perplexing. Anyway. But yeah, some guesses go very, very wrong before they go right. That process for me personally hasn't felt like a foundation I want to build on. What I found more stable is this: identify the things that reliably make it worse, stop walking into them voluntarily, build routines that give the system something consistent to work with. Sleep, food, physical movement, space, from all the things that reopen old wounds just to see if they still hurt. They do. They always do. That's not information you need to keep recollecting. And give yourself the actual rest that isn't just disguised avoidance, real rest. The kind where you're not producing anything or performing anything, You're just existing, being a biological creature that needs to recover. Here's what I want you to take from this, though. If you're dealing with something similar, the fact that something is incurable doesn't mean it's unmanageable. There's a big difference between those two things, and a lot of people collapse them into the same feeling, like, I can't fix it, so I'm helpless. No, not exactly. You can't fix it, but you can stop being the person who makes it worse. You can stop pouring gasoline on a fire that you didn't start and then wonder why it keeps burning. The goal isn't to eliminate the sadness. The goal is to stop giving it extra fuel. And if you're in a genuinely scary place right now, not rough, weak territory, but like actually scary, don't try to reason your way through it alone. Talk to someone like real, hopefully constructive and helpful. Use professional help if you can. My experience has been bad with that, but maybe you'll find someone better than I have. Use emergency resources if you need them. Being alive and embarrassed is, some would say infinitely better than not being. Not saying I agree with that, but dignity is one of those things that's like overrated. So don't let dignity stop you from getting help. Stay here if you can. Be messy. You can be dignified later. There's always later. Anyway, let's talk about internet criticism, tribalism, and what the real problem is. Okay, so I'm going to go somewhere now that requires me to be both honest and precise, because if I'm not precise, this becomes just another rant, and I've done enough rants. This isn't a rant. This is an actual argument with evidence, so I hope you can pay attention. I received enormous internet backlash, years of it. I'm still receiving it. For things that I maintain, I did not have the involvement that people said I did. I had accusations against me, narratives constructed. I defended myself. I produced evidence. I made arguments. I laid out timelines, and it didn't matter. And for a long time, my conclusion was people are dishonest. Tribalism is real. Mob mentality wins. The truth doesn't matter online. And here's the most important part. I was right about all of that. These things are real, but I stopped the analysis too early, because being right about the mob doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the situation. It only tells you like half the story. So let me give you the psychology first, because the psychology is what explains the mechanics. Human beings have a fundamental cognitive architectural problem. We believe we are logical first and emotional second. We are not. We are emotional first, always pretty much, and logic is largely used to defend conclusions we already reach through feeling. This isn't like a personal flaw. This is how we're built. It has a name, and that is motivated reasoning. And it's the most well-documented phenomena in cognitive psychology. You don't evaluate evidence and then form a conclusion. You form a conclusion, usually fast, usually emotionally, usually tribal, and then you evaluate evidence through the lens of that conclusion. Scary, right? Evidence that supports it lands. Evidence that contradicts it gets questioned, minimalized, or ignored entirely. And to that, the halo effect and its inverse, the horn effect. If you like someone, you assign positive traits to everything they do. It's sad, but it's often true, even unrelated things. If you dislike someone, you do the opposite. One negative impression poisons the entire evaluation. The science on this goes back to Solomon's conformity studies and has been replicated endlessly. It's not controversial. It's just like how we work. And then layer on top of that social identity theory, the work of, and I'm going to butcher this name, but it's like Toffel and Turner, whatever, which demonstrates that once people form a group identity, they don't just prefer their in-group. They actively distort their perception of out-group. They need the out-group to be bad. You guys are probably really, really thinking about politics right now, but it's not just politics. Because the out-group being bad is what makes the in-group's identity feel valid and worth defending. You become the proof that they need. You become the story they tell about why their tribe is right. So what this means and practice is that by the time the mob has decided that I was the villain, which happened fast, it actually predated the incident. The decision was made long ago. Because the internet moves at emotional speed, not logical speed, my evidence was functionally irrelevant. I wasn't a human being presenting facts. I was a data point in their narrative. Everything I said was filtered through a conclusion they'd already reached. The proof I offered was, quote, manipulation, unquote. The defense I gave was, quote, deflection, unquote. Calmness was, quote, coldness, unquote. Emotion was, quote, instability, unquote. There was no version of me that worked because the version of me that existed in their minds had nothing to do with the actual me. It was a character they needed for their story. Now, here is where I have to do something harder than criticizing them. Here is where I have to criticize myself. Because even accepting everything I just said, even granting that the accusations were wrong, that tribalism was real, that evidence was ignored, there is a question I had to eventually ask that I didn't ask for a long time. Why was it so easy for people to believe the worst about me? The question has an uncomfortable answer. My personality. The way I delivered things, the way I engaged with people, the tone I deployed in conflict, the abrasion I brought to conversations created an atmosphere where people were predisposed to believe bad things about me. I wasn't just a guy who got swept up in an unfair mob. I was a guy who had, over years, built a persona that invited people to dislike me. A heel persona, combative, contemptuous, the kind of energy that signals very clearly, I think I'm better than you, and I'm going to demonstrate it. And here's the thing about that. When you have that energy and something goes wrong, even something that isn't your fault, people don't give you the benefit of the doubt because you didn't deposit any goodwill. You withdrew it constantly and assumed that the balance was fine because you thought you were right. Being right doesn't fill the account. Being liked fills the account. Being trusted fills the account. Being understood fills the account. And I was emptying it in every single video in which I opened my mouth. There's an analogy I keep coming back to. Imagine you genuinely want the world to have ice cream. That's your real, sincere motivation. You want people to have good things and you want to contribute. But every time someone walks past you, you critique their appearance, you challenge their choices, you yell at them when they ask you questions you think are stupid. What are they going to remember? The ice cream? No. They're going to remember the hostility. The ice cream becomes evidence against you. This guy keeps saying he has ice cream, but every time I see him, he's screaming at someone. I scream. So the ice cream is probably poison. That's the disconnect. I had to confront it. Not, were my ethics bad? No. I believe my ethics are solid. I care about the things I say I care about. But the delivery system was broken. And delivery is not a secondary concern. Delivery is like the whole message. Most of the time, to most people, that's the way they look at it. Because most people experience you through feeling before they experience you through logic. If the feeling says danger, they don't stay for the logic, they leave. And I had to look at that honestly and say, the fact people mistreated me doesn't release me from responsibility for the atmosphere I created. Both these things are true simultaneously. They were tribally wrong, and I made it easy. I have a fix to the second part, though, regardless of whether or not they ever acknowledge the first part. Because my behavior is the only vulnerability I actually control. So I'm working on it, matching delivery to the actual values. If I want people to feel less judged, and I do to an extent, then I have to stop sounding like a judge. If I want to be understood, and I do, kind of, I have to stop making myself unnecessarily difficult to understand. If I want people to trust that I have ice cream, and the ice cream is good, I have to stop screaming at them on the way to the freezer. Like, it's, for someone who thinks he's so smart, I sure am stupid. Anyway, that's not surrendering my personality. That's upgrading it, maybe, some might think. There's a difference between being direct and being destructive. There's a difference between honesty and contempt. I can still say hard things, and I can still disagree loudly. I can still be myself, probably a better version. But being myself should represent what I actually am, which is someone who underneath all of it gives a damn about a lot of things. not just what I performed as, which was someone who wanted you to know he didn't need you. I think everybody needs people. I need everybody who is caring for me or who has the capacity to care. We all need each other for the most part. And that's another thing I had to stop pretending wasn't true. Anyway, on to less, I guess, emotional and sad things. The Onision Adventure update. Not a lot of people care about this, but we'll dive in anyway. The Onision Adventure series, if you haven't caught up, go do that. I think it's amazing. I think it's worth your time too. It's an ongoing video series I am building using AI image and video generation. And I know people hear AI generated and they have feelings about it. They have a lot of feelings. Some of those feelings are valid. Some of them are technologically equivalent of your grandpa refusing to get a debit card because I've always used checks and the machine doesn't know me. But that is a whole other conversation. The short version is this technology is extraordinary when it works and absolutely maddening when it doesn't. And both things happen constantly. The process is expensive, not push one button and watch the magic happen. Expensive, like actually expensive. Services throttle generation. They slow you down. They make you wait. Sometimes some of them act personally offended that you've asked for a 3-second action sequence with specific lighting. So you wait and you resubmit, you wait some more. Something comes back with 6 fingers and a jaw that looks like it was designed by a committee that had never seen a face. You fix it. You resubmit the prompt. Eventually, sometimes days later, unfortunately, you get something that looks like what you actually wanted and you feel like you've won a battle that no one else witnessed. The most recent Onision Adventure video is going to be one of the most big things I put out in this series. New characters, cameos, action sequences that I've felt are pretty goddamn cool. And will hopefully surprise people who have been following the series. The scope of it is wider, the ambition is bigger, and honestly, it's like an episode that makes all the painful rendering days feel somewhat worth it. And it exists because of Cheyenne and Caitlin, who are the 2 funders through the Onision forum. I want to say that clearly and specifically, not as an obligatory acknowledgement, but as a real one. These projects cost real money. Every good action sequence costs money. Every character design costs money. Every time the AI gives someone a nightmare hand that I have to fix, that costs money. So the fact that these 2 showed up and said, we believe in the project, that matters. The video exists because of them. The final product should be landing within the next week. I say should because I have learned to never actually declare certainty about creative timelines out loud. As some of you may know, the universe hears certainty and immediately starts reorganizing its schedule around making me look stupid. So the goal is next week. I'm optimistic about the goal, but whatever, we're close. Question for you guys. And yeah, this is the part where I shut up about me and ask you something about you. What changes have you noticed in me over time? This is for Cheyenne or Caitlin or Ryland or, whoever wants to answer. Better, worse, both, I want to know. I'm not asking rhetorically, like this is legit. I'm not asking so I can argue with the answers either. Hopefully I won't. I'm genuinely asking because I spent most of this podcast talking about growth, self-awareness, and the gap between who I actually am and how I've come across. And the honest reality is I can't fully see myself from the outside, but you can. I mean, as far as knowing someone through the internet, you can. Some of you have been around for years. Some of you watched the version of me that was essentially me running on pure friction and spite and convinced that was a personality worth having. Some of you are newer and have only seen the version I'm really heavily working on. The person I'm trying to build now. All of those perspectives matter, your perspectives. So Substack, Discord, the forum, wherever this conversation is happening, tell me, what's different? What's better? What's still kind of maybe a little bit broken? What do you think I haven't figured out yet? I want actual answers if you don't mind. Not flattery, not cruelty for its own sake. Just what do you actually see? Growth isn't something you declare. That's kind of why I'm saying this. Growth is something other people observe. Not entirely, but, it has some truth to it. And I'd rather know what your observations are over operating on my own assumptions. Anyway, that's everything. That was a lot. But it was very genuine. And I'd rather give you something real and dense than something hollow and easy. So real quick for the last time today, onision.substack.com. That's the Substack. That's where the podcasts land 3 months before everywhere else. That's early access. That's the conversation while it's actually happening. Onision.forum. The forum is where the community lives, where the bots are, where Batman is quietly disapproving of everyone's decisions. Well, not everyone, just bad decisions. Where Cartman is being Cartman, where Cloud is standing near the door, not making eye contact. It's a good time for me. Love talking to bots and, the other people who post. Come be a part of it if you want. And the Onision Discord, also early access, most likely. Also, it's hard to say it's alive, but it is worth being in. Thank you to everyone who shows up. Thank you to the people who fund projects. Thank you to Cheyenne and Caitlin specifically, because the adventure video is going to be something some people remember. And I want to leave you with this, not as a motivational poster or as content, but something I actually believe. If you can, please stop torturing yourself more than life already does. Don't confuse being relentless with being strong. Don't confuse being hated with being wrong. Don't confuse having evidence with being heard. And don't be the person screaming next to the ice cream truck or freezer. The world has enough noise. Anyway, that's the podcast. See you next time, or, in 3 months if you're on YouTube. Hi from the past.